Hello, I am Roshdy Ebrahim and you are watching the Energy Economist channel. In this video we are going to talk about the Colonial Concessions and the Cartelized oil. In addition to the peculiar terms of the contract conducted between the rulers of the pre-capitalist oil-rich nations and social entities in the Middle East and elsewhere, which, of course, put the question of national sovereignty on the front burner for a while, and later was counterbalanced with attempted oil nationalizations in this early era. We can observe four additional historically specific characteristics. 1. The existence of the concept of constant royalty in terms of a fixed sum per quantity of output. 2. The formation of joint ventures among oil companies for the purpose of joint control of new concessions. 3. The founding of the Achnacarry Agreement. And 4. The agreement of posting the price of oil from anywhere in the world based upon the wellhead price of oil at the U.S. Gulf of Mexico. First, in contrast with the notion of economic rent that fundamentally emerges from the appropriation of surplus profits by virtue of the ownership of land or mineral deposits in the subsurface, the oil royalties of the early period were established on an arbitrary basis, often at 4 shillings per ton of crude oil, quite unrelated to its value or price. This is a significant phenomenon that should be considered as a first step before the transformation of the oil industry in the Middle East, North Africa, Asia, and Latin America from a pre-capitalist to a growing capitalist industry, especially in the view of subsequent oil nationalizations in Mexico, 1938, Iran, 1951, and Iraq, 1972. Second, the early joint ventures among the transnational oil companies were not motivated primarily by concern over risk and capital requirements. Instead, these arrangements were the main instruments of joint control over substantial parts of the globe. They were intended for the direct control of the pace of utilization of oil reserves by a handful of private enterprises. The 1927 Red Line Agreement by the IPC partners pertaining to the Iraqi oil concessions is a case in point. It is noteworthy that the division of the world's oil resources has not been done solely according to individual company ownership, which implies the existence of a simple form of rivalry. The pattern of joint ownership has also been dominant, such as the collective agreements pertaining to the Saudis' Aramco or the Iranian consortium. Thus, one cannot rule out either rivalry or cooperation in the process of cartelization during this period. Third, another feature of this early period is the necessity of discretionary agreements. Even though it is difficult to report all instances of the worldwide cartel-like arrangements among the major oil companies, the fully documented as is Agreement of 1928, better known as Achnacarry Act, reveals a great deal about the collective effort of the companies in this period. Finally, for the purpose of pricing of direct intercompany oil transfers, the companies designated a set of administered prices called posted prices. These administered prices were initially based on the production cost of crude oil in the Gulf of Mexico, formerly the center of gravity of international oil. Even though the share of Middle East oil production has increased significantly, as the center of gravity of the world's oil reserves had shifted to the Persian Gulf, the IPC had routinely charged the freight costs from the Gulf of Mexico even for the shipments that originated from the Persian Gulf. However, as early as 1941, this practice was questioned by the British Admiralty. Similar objections were also raised, shortly after the Second World War, by the U.S. administrators of Marshall Plan in Europe. Thus, the companies were forced to get rid of this phantom freight through recognition of the Arabian Gulf as a second basing point in addition to the U.S. Gulf. But, as the cheap Middle Eastern crude was able to penetrate further into the Western markets, the companies soon recognized that, because of the significant difference in the production costs of these two basing points, the establishment of a single global posted price might not be possible. This led to the birth of a double basing point system, with two different cost structures, which included both gulfs. Accordingly, there were different posted prices for these oil regions. Nevertheless, the Arabian Gulf posted price was more reflective of the U.S. oil cost structure than of its own cost of production. In other words, the cost of oil from the Arabian Gulf, including the cost of royalties, has been a fraction of the cost of its counterpart at the Gulf of Mexico. This comparison is also relevant to the production costs at the Venezuelan oil fields, which has been substantially below the U.S. costs, but nevertheless kept according to the cartel's yardstick at the Gulf of Mexico. If you want to learn more about the colonial concessions and the cartelized oil, you could do so in my book, Economics of Oil and Gas Production, which is published on Amazon. Check it out at the link in the description. Please take a second to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and do not forget to also hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching and goodbye.